Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Office Hours. I guess we'll call it Special Hours. Tonight, we're diving deep into the world of video editing with focus on a tool that sparked probably as much loyalty as it has controversy. We're talking Final Cut Pro 10. It takes a distinctly different approach to editing. It's introduced us to magnetic timeline, background rendering, kind of a more metadata-focused way of logging your clips and organizing. So. It was a little unsettling maybe in the way that it rolled out, but for those of us who have embraced it, I think it's become a pretty amazing source of speed, but I think really creativity, because it's one of those tools that feels like, to me at least, it gets out of the way and lets me focus on the decisions. But tonight we're very lucky. We're joined by two veteran editors who I think have gone past embracing Final Cut's approach, but really mastered it. But first of those guests, Bill Davis, San Diego, California. Bill, give us just a quick sense of your history with Final Cut. When did you start using it? What drew you in? That kind of thing.
Well, I was a Final Cut editor from 1.0, literally when the program was first released, I think in 1999 or something like that. It was long time ago, or hugely long time ago. Then I built my business based on Final Cut all the way through 7, through the traditional Final Cut. Then I was right there in the middle of things because I gathered a whole bunch of friends and people who were all involved in the old Final Cut. And I was also working with Mike Horton and the people at the NAB debut of Final Cut 10. And so I was pretty involved in that. And I was there that night and I watched everybody go, wow, this is totally different. And over the course of the weeks and months after that, I kind of was down deep into the system of watching the bifurcation. People who went, this is not what I wanted. I don't want this. Please get this out of my face. I just wanted a faster version of the old thing. And then some people on the other side going, well, wait a second, this has got a lot of really interesting stuff in it. But I think to this day, there's still a lot of residuals from that whole process. But I went through the whole thing. I finally decided I'm just going to dive into this and see what it's like. It took me about 2 months as an experienced editor to start really getting my feet under me, but then I started finding weird things happening in terms of getting work done a lot faster than I ever had before. And it just kept growing and growing and growing on me until I fully embraced it. And that was a little more than a decade ago. So that's my story.
And then from Emeryville, California, we're joined by Chris Fenwick. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, it's me.
So when did you first enter, or when did Final Cut, I guess, enter your workflow? Like, what made that stick? When did you kind of gravitate towards into this whole world?
Final Cut would be number 10 and number 11 of the platforms that I have edited on in my career. And I think that's important because there's a huge contingency of people that say, you know, that think that the phrase, well, I'm a Final Cut editor, it's like a kick in the gut, and it means you don't know what you're talking about and you just work with that stupid toy. And that's why I make I like to say, well, literally Final Cut Classic, anything before 10, I call Final Cut Classic, and then Final Cut 10, I don't even think they call it that anymore. Is literally like the 10th and the 11th platform that I have had to learn in my career, going all the way back to VHS tapes and, you know, editing without controllers, and then, you know, the old RM450 and all the iterations of like the JVC crap of the 80s. It was really bad back then. It was like rubbing sticks together and calling it video. But
you miss pre-roll? Come on.
Yeah, no. I mean, I did, Bill, I did a whole lot of video in the late 80s where if a multi-camera in a studio, take 2, take 3, take 1, and making a mistake and going, okay, cut. And the director turned to me and he'd say, find an edit point. And on the front panel of the U-matic decks, I'd find an in point. I would mark an in point, and then I'd hit the pre-roll button, and the machine would go whoop, 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 back 3 seconds, and they'd say, okay, is everybody ready on this? And I'd have to say, look, you're going to say when the guy points at your face hole, you say, well, let's take a look at this next problem that we have here. Stand by. You ready? Okay, in 5, 4, roll, 2, 1, cue him. Let's take a look at this next problem we have here. And the machine would make the edit live. We didn't edit anything. We couldn't afford all of that, both with the time and the hardware. So we just did it as we could. So
Chris and I both worked in the time when a literal single cut edit could take you 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes.
I've edited for decades, and Final Cut is just one of the tools that I have used throughout my career.
So
what
really,
I'm trying to say.
It's to the point where you've got people who've lived it, right? It's not that they've studied it and read about it. They've lived it all the way through the introduction of digital editing and NLEs in general to what we're focusing on tonight, and that's Final Cut. Now, Bill has prepared a couple of quick visuals about some of the key concepts within Final Cut that if you're new to it, or maybe even if you have been using Final Cut for a while, there's a couple foundational things that if you understand the mechanics of those, it makes the rest of your project and the rest of your workflow and process so much easier. And I think I stole this concept from Chris, but you do all the thinking ahead of time so that by the time you're actually doing the thing, you can focus on doing it and you're not thinking about all that little stuff. But Bill, why don't you dive in on that first concept, and then we'll keep cruising. And one more thing though, I do want to remind everybody that we're open for questions in Makana. So there's a link in the YouTube description. If you click on that, if you're watching us live, you can interact with us in real time, also chat, vote, all the stuff that you can normally do. We've got a special Makana for this special show, so you got to be in that one. Bill, kick us off with that first concept.
Okay, so first thing I wanted to say is that there were at least a dozen things in Final Cut that were really nobody had ever seen before. And when we were watching it in that first initial thing, a lot of people were going, what? I've never seen an editorial system do this. This idea of a magnetic timeline where there is no real black space behind your stuff and everything magnetically connects to everything else. Nobody understood that at first. So all the things that the original editors had built their editing systems off on, which was really a virtual version of tape reels and simple A/B roll cut editing, that stuff, they really changed significantly. So to me, there were 3 real things I came out of the early days and going, wow. Number one, I didn't realize this at first, but I came to figure out that the most powerful thing to me about it was the keyword database that was attached to Final Cut. And it works on this process of ranges. And I'll show you a little bit about that as we go through the demo stuff. The second was magnetism, because we had never seen something like that. There were editors who said, well, that's just like putting your editor in this guy. It's not. You have both horizontal magnetism that keeps all of your clips on your timeline together. You also have vertical magnetism, where you can literally take a B-roll shot or an audio clip or a graphic or whatever, and once you magnetically attach it to a point in your timeline, it stays there no matter where you put that clip. That was revolutionary. And the third thing I want to talk a little bit about to people who don't understand how much rethinking they did was a concept that they brought in later called rolls, which allows you to take a piece of audio content especially and put tagging on it in such a way that you can separate out individual parts of a mix. And they did this, I think, originally because there was a lot of people who were doing turnovers for movies and things like that. And when you're doing that, you have to take all the dialogue and get it out to here, and you want to take all of the special effects stuff and put it over to that guy who's going to work on it. So, but boy, that turned out for me to be transformative for the work that I do. And it started me thinking about the fact that unlike most of the editors who I always think of as video editors exclusively, I mean, NLE, nonlinear editing of video, I started to think of Final Cut not so much as a video editor, but as just a content creation tool, because I started doing not just my video edits in it, I started making graphics in it, I started doing audio work in it, to the point where now I've been playing for the last 3 or 4 years with audiobooks, and I'm actually recording them in Final Cut. The same tools that they pioneered, the magnetic editing, this vertical magnetism, all these things and roles really make all sorts of content creation super easier. So I got a couple of things to show. I want to show you some of the kinds of things I did over those first years. So I'm gonna do a little bit of playback. It won't take very long here. Let me get to the point where I can punch up number 2. You should see this. I'm going to talk over this whole thing, and I'm not going to do more than just literally play this back for you. Why isn't it playing? There we go. You should be able to hear me talk about it now. So these are standard commercials, right? So I was just trying to figure out how to make my editing work for my standard kind of business, and these are the kind of things that I started doing back in the early days. These are just normal commercials, product shots, regular spots, those kind of things. But then I started figuring out this graphics approach, and I started doing a lot of these kind of explainer videos, and it was really not something I had to once go out to After Effects for. I could do these inside Final Cut because Apple had built in all of their graphic core processing into Final Cut. They'd used a subset of motion, built it into Final Cut. And the same thing that you'll find out a little bit later in terms of them doing the same thing with audio. They took all the audio capabilities that a program like Logic had, they took a subset of it and built it directly into Final Cut. So I suddenly realized, wait, I don't just have a video program. I have a graphics program for motion graphics. I have an audio program for complicated audio work. I can do all of these kind of things in one program, and it's giving me these incredible tools to do it more efficiently. I started turning this work around way faster than I ever was able to before. And more than just turning it around, I found I could comp work really quickly. And comping stuff, even when we got into like vertical stuff, to be able to comp something for a client super fast in a couple of hours started just closing more work than I ever thought possible. Because instead of explaining storyboards or something like that, I'd produce some little thing like this, and the next thing you know, I've got another client because they can see it. A lot of the business type, the client folks, they're just not particularly wow oriented in terms of a pitch verbally. They want to see something. So that was really the big turning point for me. And then a little bit later, I'll show you some of my timelines for things like the audio work, where it can get really complicated, but even in the most complicated kinds of things, it can be really easy to do. And in fact, a lot of my friends that I developed around the world from that thing were people who were doing complicated shows, documentaries and things like that, excuse me. Because Final Cut has this ability to take a complicated mass of data and simplify it, and then simplify it again, and simplify it again until it makes sense, and that's what makes you work really fast. So those are just some initial thoughts about what I'd like to talk about, but I don't want to spend the whole time talking, so let's get to Chris or whomever.
Well, and the other thing that I think about when you specifically talk about ranges and keywords and roles, it's one of these things that when I look at footage, like here I have a project that I put some test footage in from. The idea that I could take this part of the project and say, and open up my keyword editor and then call this, market movement, if I'm talking about, I want to see people, but then I could take this other part of the clip and say, well, I'm just telling a little sub story about the pigeons that are in this market, so I'm going to mark that as pigeons. I can have down here, pigeons is a discrete clip from market movement. The entire clip is still back there. It's still able to but I'm not having to take pieces of the media out and make copies and move it all around. It seems simple, but it was one of those things that when that came out, it really improved my ability to get through logging the footage. The second thing that's really excited me lately, and Chris was talking about this a little bit in the pre-show, is the introduction of the automatic subtitling has felt that way again, where all of a sudden I can get down to the editing part of it a lot faster because the front end work has completely lessened. Chris, what were you working on with that? What were you working on with the automatic subtitling?
I'm going to tell you a couple stories. I'm ignoring your question. So,
okay.
It's the Chris I love.
It was just no. I'll do your question. I'll do your little question, CJ. It was just a sit down interview. You know, if you're shooting something scripted, you say, okay, here's the line. You say, take, read it. I call it an exploratory interview where you just let somebody. You know, you're going to ask him 10 questions, and they're gonna ramble on, and then you're gonna cherry pick and pick and choose and craft a story out of a bunch of babbling. So I do a lot of that. Hence the editorial in our company named Slice Editorial. So, but quite often the typical workflows, we will take, a couple of hours of interview, literally, maybe 4 people at a half hour a piece, make window dubs, ship them off to an actual transcriber. We don't do all the automatic stuff. And then the client will go and highlight the stuff that they think is cool. Then we'll pull those selects, and then we'll craft the story out of the selects. But with this new auto transcription thing, and here's the thing, to be honest, Final Cut's behind the game on this. Adobe did it first, but Final Cut does it quite well. So I can throw I just did this in the pre-show. I took a 26-minute interview with some kid talking about golf. Right click on it in the timeline, say subtitle it. Took 52 seconds, so whatever that is, a half a second per minute, whatever. You do the math. Took 52 seconds to subtitle the whole thing. And it's like, I don't care. I don't want the subtitles, nor do I, but using the timeline index in Final Cut, it's fully searchable now. So when I did get a paper edit from the client, and I could just scroll through it and go, oh, here's something that she highlighted in yellow, and he says, boy, I sure love golf. I could just type in the timeline index, boy, I sure, and all of a sudden all those clips start automatically filtering down. Oh, here's the clip. Click on it. Jumps right to that point in the timeline, marking in, scroll to the end, marking out, copy and paste it into my cut down timeline. And by the way, all those subtitles go with it. So I can still search for what an individual word he says. And I don't know if you ever do this, but like a lot of times people will fumble a word, and I'll go and I'll search, well, gee, did he say that word again? Did he say that word another time? And I'll just search for the word, and then I'll say, oh, he wasn't chewing his cud at that moment, and I'll lift that word out and just fly it in. I don't need to do the whole take. I just need to hear the word right. I'll just fly that word in sync with the whatever. Now, there's another thing you were mentioning, range-based keywords. I want to talk a little bit about keywords because they're super important. A lot of times people who use Final Cut, they get all excited about something and they talk about it, and anybody on any other editor is go, stupid, I can do that. You might be able to do kind of it, but you're probably not doing it the same way. Now, range-based keywords are super important because I can take a clip and I go, oh, here's a clip of Charlie Brown. And I can put the clip of Charlie Brown in a folder called Charlie Brown Clips. And then I get another clip of Charlie Brown, and here's the one where Lucy pulls the football away from him, right? Okay. Do I put that in the Charlie Brown folder, or do I put it in the Lucy folder? Or do I put it in the football folder? Which folder do I put that clip in? With keywords, I can put it in all 3 of the keyword collections, so that if at the moment that I'm thinking of Charlie Brown kicking the football, am I just dating myself that that's a relevant reference? Okay, so so if I'm thinking at that moment I want to see the football gag, I can just go to the keyword selections tagged with football, and I'm going to find that clip. Okay. So, but I can also find it in the Charlie Brown folder or keyword. I can also find it in the Lucy keyword. So I get to store things, one thing, in multiple pockets and be able to find it when I'm looking for it. Now, that's keywording. Now let's talk about range base. Several years ago, I did a show for a certain Bavarian motor company, and I was traveling in a tour bus across country for 2 weeks, and I was delivering 2 to 3 videos a day. And I knew, because reasons, that one of the videos we were going to produce on that trip was drivers and their dogs. That was one, because they knew a lot of people had their dogs, so they're going at some point we're going to do so. So I knew that, and that meant that every day when I had 5 camera operators feeding me footage, by the way, on that thing. Every time I was going through footage and stumbling through and trying to find specific stuff, you know how camera people are. They're like, oh, I'm shooting the taco bar. Oh, look, a dog, swish pan. Oh, cute dog. Oh, back to the taco bar, right? Because they're camera people and they're camera people. I'll just leave it at that. So anytime I saw a dog in a 5-minute clip, I would just drag a range, keyword it with a shot of a dog, dog. So about a week and a half into the project, the producer comes into the tour bus and she goes, hey, let's do the dog video today. I'm like, okay. And I went and I selected the keyword for dogs, and I had like 40 shots of people and their dogs. Done. Select all, drop it into a timeline. What do you want to do next? Put a little music, tidy it up, etc.
Yeah, so I actually have a graphic of this process if you want to see it.
Let's do it, Bill.
Okay. So this is the fundamentals of range-based keywording. When I realized this happened in Final Cut, it blew me away. So this blue clip down here is representing the whole thing, right? So I'm in the middle of interviews, and I have this interview thing, and I want to look through and I want to find some things. So I'm going to put the tag interviews on this whole clip. Now I'm going to go back in, and we don't just tag a whole clip. I can put ranges on. So where you see purple there, I've added 3 additional keywords. One for accounting, one for Doug, and one for Q1, because those are 3 subtopics talked about in just this part of the whole clip we tagged before. Now I'm going to go through, and right after Doug finishes talking, Gene joins him. So I've got a range that has both Doug and Gene in it, and it also comes from 2012. So I'm going to put those 2 additional tags in there. And the key concept here is that unlike subclips in the old days, keywords can overlap. They can contain parts or all of other clips. They can have put keywords on a single frame if you want to, or on a long swath. So it becomes unbelievably flexible if you have a strategy for figuring out what you need to be able to find later. And you can, as Chris mentioned, you can pull these up instantly.
Because when you walk away, when you walk away and come back a day or a week or a couple days later, you go in and it's like, okay, I can look right at my index that's in my library and I can see exactly where my different keywords were. And besides looking at the bins over here on the left, I can also just quickly see where in this particular subclip am I going to get my and it's that metadata organizational tool that I think a lot of people don't focus on enough.
The danger for a lot of people is it takes time to mark up your footage properly. You have to have the discipline to do this. And I didn't find this out until I was doing a gig that I had done a couple of years previously, and I knew that it was one of those on-prem for a big corporation, and they would be shooting all week, and the footage would come into me, and I would figure it out. It always took me until the last day, and I always spent the last 48 hours without any sleep, because I'd been getting these tapes in, and I'd been marking them, and I've been figuring out where they were going. And this year I decided I was going to do it in Final Cut. And so I just started marking up all the footage, but not trying to put anything on timeline. And by the time I got to, I think it was Thursday night, I was freaked out because I had not put a single clip on a timeline. And I was sure I was going to fail because I had to show this video on Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I was literally going through flop sweat thinking I was going to die and be, this is the last time I'd ever worked for these people. But I finally got the last few tapes in and I put my keywords in and I started, okay, now I got to build this thing. 6 hours later, I had my rough cut done. I couldn't believe it. I actually got to sleep that night. And it's the first time in that job I had ever gotten to sleep. And I didn't realize it at the time. But the leveraging of doing this markup made it so easy to construct the timeline, because if you do this with intent, you always know what your next shot is. You can always find it with a click or two. You type in a couple of things, that shot you were thinking about, because you have it tagged somehow, shows up. I learned these little tricks, like I would put the keyword wow on the best little moments when somebody turned around and gave me a smile or something like that. And when I went to build an intro to a section or something like that, I just call up wow, and all the jewels from the entire shoot were right there for me to pick from. So instead of having to go into the library and figure out where everything was, the database, because I had worked it in advance, was doing all that for me.
And because you've got overlap there, you didn't have to look for the clip that was tagged wow in each of those individual folders, and they were in those all of their own folders and the wow.
Yeah, and so I also want to point out, Bill, you mentioned old-timey, you mentioned doing subclips. Subclips worked really good. It's good point. And this is what I meant, where a lot of people will go, oh, I can do that on my edits. No, you can't. So a subclip is totally different, because like if you go to Final Cut Classic, a subclip was a defined period of time, and if you wanted to get, I need 7 more frames, you'd have to match frame into the original stuff, and you don't have that issue. But being able to put things in multiple places, very, very important. Bill, I have to ask you, what's your sock drawer look like? Is it perfect, or you just throw them all in there?
I have both. I have bundled, wrapped up toe of the ones that I have matched, and they're there. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there. I like to think I can live in both messy.
I panic when I can't find the matching sock. Should we, at the risk of hosting the show?
We do have some questions stacking up, and Cindy Drozda from Erie, Colorado is here to read for us, and we appreciate that very much. Why don't we dive right in with the first one, and we can get some feedback from the audience.
Our first question's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Where have you received your best training on Final Cut Pro, and who would you go to with any tough issues today?
Go ahead, Chris.
Easy, totally easy. I have only purchased, given my hard-earned money, cash money, to one company, and that's Ripple Training. Steve Martin and Mark Spencer, super geniuses, great human beings also, and they know what they're talking about. And so if you really want to bare bones basics, explain it from the ground up, without a doubt, you go to Ripple Training. They also do that thing, and I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called, Steve, but there's that little button on the upper left-hand corner where it has all the built-in stuff that it's all inside Final. It can be inside Final Cut. What are those called? Extensions or something?
Workflow extensions.
System inits.
No, they're workflow extensions. They live in the upper left-hand corner of Final Cut, and you can pull one up anytime, and they have a package you can put in there.
Without a doubt. Now, that being said, there's a lot of really smart kids on the YouTube. I can't remember all their names.
I want to say a couple of things about this, too. Look, I've always said, if you're coming fresh as an editor and you don't have any other thing this is going to be easy for you, because you're going to learn this system. If you're coming from a long time as a traditional editor, you can't. I find those people fall into 2 categories: resistive people and exploratory people. If you're one of the exploratory people, you will have a little more trouble because you'll have to unlearn the way you used to do something. I mean, the magnetic timeline will frustrate you for a while because you're used to timeline behaviors that aren't like this. But then you will get the resistive people who just it doesn't work the way I expect it to work, and I'm angry, and it takes them usually significantly longer to figure it out. So just figure out what kind of person you are. There's no judgment in this because there are great editors on every one of the programs that are out there, and they work a bit different. So, people get great work done in everything. But I do think there's a certain kind of freewheeling, exploratory, I'm interested in learning something new kind of person who gravitated toward Final Cut in the early days because it was something new.
And I got the first stuff I ever edited was probably Final Cut 5 or 6. And so by the time Final Cut 10 came out, I was not nearly as seasoned as everybody else in the panel, but I had a decent couple thousand hours into it. But I was lucky enough at the time to be working for the fruit company, and I got the training of like, hey, you work at the smart people bar, and we want you to they're going to come in and ask you questions on it. So
did you work at the Apple store?
I
didn't know that.
But I was the only one who knew Final Cut. So so it was in Chicago, and we'd have people come in for like a one-on-one session. One time I taught like one of the Blackhawks hockey players like how to use Aperture, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Mike Ditka, I fixed his phone once. Like, you got all sorts of characters. But somebody came in with Final Cut questions, and I immediately became like the commodity because they're like, hey, CJ knows Final Cut. So they would pull me upstairs. So when they called them creatives who worked with the one-on-one trainings, they put them behind like next to the Genius bar, so they weren't quite geniuses, but they were like... Anyway, when Final Cut needed help, all of a sudden I was promoted from lowly salesperson to, hey, you can be a creative for a day. So I got the inside Final Cut training. Now, at the same time that I was doing that job, I was in college doing that job, and then I also worked in the ChicagoTribune.com's video department, cutting video for news. And I was like leading the charge. Everybody else was, when Final Cut 10, when the transition happened, everybody abandoned it, went to Premiere, and it was like me and two other guys who were like, we're going to do Final Cut 10. And if we can't produce the same level of output as everybody else, we'll learn Premiere. But if we're going to learn something new, why not do it this way? And they let us. And then after we found out that we were being underpaid, and left, they shut the department down and outsourced it. But the Final Cut people were, I don't want to say twice as fast, but we were reliably faster than anybody else at getting all those projects out the door. But it was like Bill said, going in with a beginner's mind and forgetting everything that we knew and trying to embrace this new way of thinking is what made us fast. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I think everybody has a, oh my goodness, this is so fast story. I had to be very careful when I adapted Final Cut 10 because, we have a building full of editors that all need to be working the same way. And I didn't want to drag people into, a hellish moonscape and then say, yeah, sorry, let's do something else. So I needed to, I spent about 9 months from the release until I came to the conclusion where I said to my boss, I go, yeah, this is what we're doing. I know how to do it. I've done it. I know how to teach it, and it will work within our ecosystem with all of the various clientele and blah, blah, blah we have. So anyway, I had a job that I knew that no other editor in the building was going to have to touch. And I was like, okay, this will be a good test. And it's scheduled. I have a week scheduled to do it. Starting Monday, I got to be done by Friday. And I started work on it. And I will admit, there was some, cursing and yelling at computer screens and throwing things at walls. Like, why does this have to be so, blankety blank hard, et cetera, et cetera. And then Wednesday, or probably about Thursday around 10 a.m., I realized, oh, I'm done. So I finished like almost 2 days early. I had 5 days booked, and I was like, okay, so well, clearly I have to go back, and I went back through it, and I kept watching. I was like, no, I'm really done. And that was the first job. And then the next one that just went fabulously well was the tour bus job I told you about, where I was editing in a bus driving cross country. And literally at the time, that year, 2012, no other editor on the planet could have done the job with the turnarounds and speed that I had. And then I came back from that. I'm like, yeah, it's done. We're moving. And then it was a matter of training all the house editors so that we could all be working on the same platform.
That's awesome. Why don't we let's dive into the next question.
This question's from me, and I'm wondering, how does Final Cut Pro compare with DaVinci Resolve, and what are the differences between them?
So I've done a lot of color-specific work in DaVinci Resolve. I've played around a little bit with editing. I've done only 2 projects just to see what it felt like in Resolve, and then moved it over into the color correction. And I'll admit, having that powerful color corrector at the end of the process and being able to have it all be integrated was a major like speed boost for that part of it. Because if I am working by myself and I just change my mind, I'm not working on a big team, I can move back into the timeline, nudge some stuff around, go back into the color correction, and if I haven't changed radically changed the order of the shots, I might not even need to make any changes when I go to hit deliver. And so that is a pretty powerful tool for that. However, and maybe it's because I have too many muscles in Final Cut, I feel like that I'm just slower. Like everything feels slower. The organization of the clips doesn't feel as natural, and
it is slower. It feels slower because it is slower, it is. And the number one issue that you have, and if you're just coloring in the Resolve, you're not going to run into this, but when you're editing in something that's track based, you have to deal with clip collisions. It happens, and if you don't know what it is, then you're not really editing yet, and it doesn't matter what you cut in. But if you don't know what clip collisions are, you're not going to have that in Final Cut. And that alone, to me, is like the number one reason why I want to have everybody, especially like the younger team members that we have, you're like, I don't want to have to teach you all of that. Just do it like this and it'll be easy. I want to say something about
that, but go ahead, Chris, finish up.
One last thing, Bill. But before I cut you off next time, the other thing that I think is super important to remember is the idea of round tripping or transporting a project from one app to another. So like people get enamored with the idea that Resolve has the best color correction on the planet. Whatever. I've never seen anybody do anything in Resolve color that I couldn't do in Final Cut, but maybe I'm just a neophyte, whatever. So the idea of saying, well, I'm just going to cut in Final Cut or whatever, and then I'm going to transfer it over here to do color or whatever. I made this analogy with somebody the other day. Let's say you own a Ford, but your favorite mechanic works for Mercedes, okay? And all the bolts on your car, your Ford truck, are Imperial, and all of the tools at the Mercedes dealer are metric. Now, can the Mercedes dealer work on your Ford? Well, maybe. And what you want to tell that guy is, hey, just go buy some Imperial tools, it'll be fine. But what most people try to do when they try to transport a project from one app to another, it's more akin to saying, okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to take your truck and any tool or any bolt that you think I'm going to have to adjust, I need you to pull those bolts out and replace them with metric bolts. Then deliver it to your buddy at the Mercedes dealer who's a mechanic there, so all of his tools will work. It's literally that maddening sometimes to transport something from one app to another, and you're better off just staying in one. And if you absolutely positively have to have all the color of Resolve, just learn how to edit in Resolve. I pity you. I'm sorry that you have to drag your, go through all of that. But honestly, I think when people say, oh, I have to do my color in Resolve, I don't think they've really explored the power of all the color tools in
and
Final
if it
Cut.
weren't for my hardware surfaces, I would not be as attached to it. I've gotten very much into the muscle memory of using the panel and maybe with the wheels and all that other stuff. But I would agree with you, for everything that I've done just the color on, and I've done it in Resolve, they edited in Premiere, I said, okay, well, I'm a Resolve editor. Are you okay with doing it online? Are you okay to remarry everything after I deliver it back to you? Without a doubt, I spent an inordinate amount of time checking every frame and tweaking everything on the way in to look for all the stuff that changed on the way in, and then on the way back, they call me and ask for help, and I said, okay, but I have to.
It's like changing all the half-inch bolts to 12 millimeter.
I'm going to push back on this a little bit, because I think you guys are talking about the upholstery in the car, and you're not talking about the car. These other things, color correction, audio manipulation, there are plenty of, it doesn't work the way I would like it to work, and I honor that. I think that's fine. The missing thing here is the thing that makes Final Cut extraordinary in my estimation is what happened to me the very first time I tried to do a radio spot using Final Cut. What happened was I had done all these takes. It was a talent that was off, and I was recording the thing. And so we did, all right, we're going to do the whole spot 2 or 3 times. And we're going to go through and we're going to do line 1 a couple of times and line 2 a couple of, blah, 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 blah. We did, and I had all these takes, and I have to make sense out of them. So I went in and I simply said, every time that's the talent reads line 1, I'm going to mark that as a tag tied line 1. Line 2, same thing. Line 3, wherever it was in one of the main takes or things, I'm just going to do that. And now when I hit 1, all the ones come up, and I'm going to trim them in the browser. And this is something I had never done before in my life. I mean, I was going to trim them in the browser. What does that mean? It's like trimming them before they even ever hit a timeline. And I said to myself, okay, I've gone through all the line 1s, and 2 is great. 3 might work better. So I'm going to take 2 and 3, and I'm going to tag those A and B, and I'm going to get all my A's across there. And what happened to me was that I figured if I was precise with putting my in and out points for these tags, and I learned to do it this way, there's a rhythm to a piece of radio copy, right? Go to the store today and buy this and this and this, you'll love it. There's a rhythm to that delivery, and I thought, I'm going to take half of the space behind each one of those lines, and I'm going to take half the space in front of each one of the lines, and I'm going to tag those precisely. Here's what happened. I called up all my A takes at the beginning. I dragged them all as a group onto the timeline, and I said, now let me trim it. I played it back. It was perfect. The spot was absolutely perfect. And I said, there's nothing I need to change. I had actually edited my scenes in the browser before I ever got onto the timeline. And that's the thing I think that saves people more time than anything else. Think about like this. If you go to Home Depot to buy a shed, you can buy all the raw wood. And if you're Chris Fenwick and a great carpenter, you want to saw everything yourself. And you can also get a shed or a workbench kit, where somebody has already said all 4 legs are going to be the same length, all the carriage bolts are going to be here, the backsplash is going to be there, and if you just assemble this according to the directions, you will save a ton of time and a ton of work making your workbench. For me, if you're careful about keywording and careful about tagging things, everything you build on a timeline is like that workbench. It comes in preset. And unlike the workbench, if you set those points of this is where I want the clip to land on my timeline, if you get it wrong, you can extend the piece of wood out on the front, or extend it on the back, or replace it with one of the other pre-cut pieces instantaneously. If the client doesn't like that read of line B3, you just grab one of the other 4 B3s you've got tagged, you bring them all up, you say, you like this one? No. You like this one? Nope. You like this one? Yeah, you like that better? Here, bang, it's in the timeline, listen to it.
Bill, do you ever use the audition features?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Audition is great because it's a magnetic timeline. We haven't even had time to explain the magnetic timeline. I wanted to show some of it, but I'm not sure we're going to have time for that. Those auditions expand or contract the overall timeline. If I have a line 2 that is 4 seconds and a line 2 that was slower and is 6 seconds, rifling through the auditions for a client, let's hear it with line 1, let's hear it with line 2, the timeline actually automatically expands and contracts to take care of the new length of the new content. And yeah, if you've got somebody who's doing spots and they want to just play with the takes that have come in from the actors in the field, it is unbelievable for that.
Let's keep cruising. We've got a couple more questions to get to, and I know that we're trying to get out at the top of the hour, so why don't we'll keep going through these. Next question, please, Cindy.
Joe Phillips in Murphy, North Carolina asks, DaVinci Resolve brags about all the blockbusters produced with their software. What are some of Final Cut Pro's productions that rival DaVinci?
Minor revision. DaVinci Resolve brags about every film that has been touched by Resolve in some way. So if they used it for color correction, they put it on the marquee. That doesn't necessarily mean they cut the whole show in Resolve. Most of the time it probably means that it was colored by Resolve. But it's true, when you start to look up, okay, what were the marquee productions that were made using Final Cut, you immediately go back to, well, David Fincher used it for The Social Network, and he used it for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and the movies almost stop in 2011 with the release of Final Cut 10. And I'm convinced that that's because the way that Apple rolled out the transition from 7 to 10 was a little bit of a pull the rug out from under us. It seemed like, okay, we're not going to support 7 anymore, and here's 10. And it was like taking the floppy drive out and putting in a CD drive. It was too hard of a switch, and I think that scar hurt a lot of people. And
I'd have a different take on it. I just don't think they ended up, they knew there was going to be prestige at doing movies, but they weren't going to sell a lot of software. I mean, how many people are making movies out there? 1,000? America, 10,000? Okay, let's give you 10,000 people are actually making films. How many people are making YouTube content? 10 million?
More.
50
a lot
million?
more.
400 million? If you were going to sell a product that used to be $2,000 or $1,200 and you were going to sell it for $300
one time,
wouldn't you like to sell a million? Yeah, and you were never going to ask them for a penny more. Wouldn't you rather go into a marketplace of 10 million people than a marketplace of 10,000 people? I would. Yeah, I just think they knew the game they were playing.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that the folks who are using Final Cut way outnumber the Hollywood people. Like Alex has talked about it before. Like if the pyramid of people, this is all the editors, this much is Final Cut and Resolve and a little bit of Premiere, and then you start to move up, and just a teeny little top of the pyramid is your Avid editors. I don't have a fancy telestrator, so I've got to use my hands. But
and look at those poor people. That's a disaster out there. Avid has not really innovated anything in the last 3 or 4 years. Yes, a lot of people ran to DaVinci. It's a great it is the best, in my opinion, of all the traditional non-magnetic timelines that work the way they've been working since 1963 in editing. There's only one program, to the best of my knowledge, that incorporated all this new thinking in terms of range-based keywords and magnetic timelines and all of these innovations, and I consider them serious innovations that let you do more work quicker and less frustrating. You can be less anxious about meeting deadlines and about having fun editing. A lot of us Final Cut editors in the early days are saying, yeah, I know people say we shouldn't be using this, but it's so much fun. Why? Because you can play. You can get in there and you can say, what would happen if I took scenes 2 and 3 and put them behind 5? Well, let me just do it. And you do it. And it takes you 10 seconds and you go, nah. And so you do Command Z and it all goes back the way and it magnetically snaps exactly where you were before. And there's 100 things like that.
I feel like and I only have experience as a solo editor or working on a small team with maybe 2 or 3 people. But I feel like the tool gets out of the way is the best thing that I can use to describe how I feel with Final Cut, is that I'm able to focus on the story that I'm telling and how I want it to feel instead of trying to figure out, like, how am I getting it done? And that happened for me really, really quickly. Go ahead, Chris.
So, yes, that's true. But in defense of everybody else, a power user using anything can make the tool get out of the way. But there's an important thing, and I used to talk about years ago, I used to have a podcast all about the Final Cut. So if you were using Final Cut Classic or, DaVinci or Premiere or, Avid, and you're a power user, you know how to, let's say you have 5 clips in a timeline, and you want to move clip, so bear with me, 2 and 3, and you want to move them after 4. So now when you count your clips, it'll be 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, okay, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, a power user knows that you can shift click clips 2 and 3. You can cut and ripple. Now in Final Cut Classic, that was an extended keyboard shortcut you had to know. You had to mash down on a whole bunch of keys at once, but you could cut and ripple. And while those shots are kind of held in a state of limbo in the copy buffer, you now have 1, 4, 5. You could then slide your cursor over in between clips 4 and 5, and you could paste and ripple. So you'd get 1, 4, 2, 3, 5. But in order to paste ripple, you had to know that fancy keyboard shortcut. And in order to cut ripple, you had to know that fancy keyboard shortcut. The reason Final Cut 10 feels like it gets out of the way for somebody who isn't a 16-hour-a-day editor who knows every shortcut in the app that you are choosing to use is that in Final Cut, because of the magnetic timeline that we've alluded to, the idea of cut and ripple and paste and ripple is the default. It just does that. You don't have to know the extra, deforming keyboard shortcut to get 17 keys pushed down all at once.
It feels like it feels like the on ramp is a lot shallower, and like the way that you. Okay.
I would disagree. And in actuality, I think the reason that Final Cut hasn't really caught on after whatever it's been, 15 years, or 13 years, is that it doesn't have an easy learning curve. It has a learning wall. And if you have any history, and again, remember at the beginning of the hour, I said that Final Cut 7 was the 10th edit platform I learned. Final Cut 10 was the 11th editing platform I've learned. And then editing on my iPhone, that'd be number 12. Okay, so, but if you have any prior history, there's some stuff you gotta learn to let go. You gotta learn to let go. And I call that the learning wall. But once you get over that wall, if you just sat down with somebody like Steve Martin or whatever and said, Steve, show me the 5 things I got to know. Can you just throw me a bone here? Frankly, he would probably do it, or he might point you to one of his great videos that he sells. But you get over that wall, and then it's all, and this analogy sounds bad, it's downhill from there. It's easy sailing. It's coasting. It's not downhill like, oh, my life is ruined downhill, but it's just woo. It's like hopping on a soapbox derby and flying down the hill. But you got to get over that little wall in the beginning. But once you do, but what happened is you had all these people who had used old, antiquated, track-based systems that were set in their ways. This is the way editing has to be. And then all of a sudden they don't have to think about that thing. And they throw their hands up and they say, oh, this is ridiculous. I think about do you remember the Conan O'Brien sketch when Final Cut 10 came out? I mean, literally on a late night comedy show, the editors are and the writers are doing a sketch about a stupid piece of software.
Yeah, a little too inside baseball probably for late night, but they felt a little strongly about it.
Do we want to do anything on a timeline? We've been talking about. Oh, go to the questions.
Let's go to the next question.
We're not doing any editing though.
I know. We're gonna have. This is gonna have to be a series at this point. This is too much fun. Go ahead, Cindy.
Next question's from Tony L. Mobley in Noonan. What advice do you both have for beginners using this video editor?
I would say, go ahead, Bill.
Do it with intent. If you can take one of the classes that is structured well from somebody like Steve and Mark, that would be a great way to get into it. Also, here's the thing. These programs are so complex and they do so many things that if you just try to learn it yourself and fool around and you don't get any structured things, you're going to miss so much. I call it Swiss cheese editing, Swiss cheese learning, and I used to do a lot of it myself, which is I would get a piece of software and I would learn what I needed to know to get this job done, and then I'd never know about all the other things that the software does. And in Final Cut, there is a metadata flow through the program and a workflow through the program. It starts when you bring things into it on the browser. It's kind of like the left side, and you do your markup and your keywords and stuff like that there. Once you've done that, you move to the right into the timeline and you start assembling things. And then there's the export stuff that sends it out the back end over on the right. And in each of those stages, if you just dive into it, and a lot of editors I know just try to put something on a timeline and say, let me start cutting, because I don't start to learn this tool until I start to do that. And I can't tell you how many I had to drag back and go, no, you must, if you want to use this tool correctly, you must understand about inherited metadata at the beginning, because if somebody in the field sets things like their audio recorder correctly, that stuff comes in with tags telling you the names of all the characters, and it comes in as stems under those character names. And instead of having to go look for everything that was said by the character Sally in the play, it's already there. It's already marked for you. There's a role for Sally. You can find all of her instantly and fix that annoying nasal quality that she had when she was delivering her lines. You get that done in 10 minutes at the beginning of your work session instead of having to fight it for 3 weeks while you're editing. There is a process.
Go ahead, Chris.
All true but daunting. This is what I would say, Tony. Bill's not wrong. Bill's not wrong. Mark this day on your calendar. I agree with Bill. But I will tell you this. What I tell most people, if you want to learn how to edit, editing is really easy. Okay, you don't need to pay somebody like me to do it for you. It's really easy. All you got to do is put all your stuff in a timeline and then rewind the playhead to the beginning and press play. When you see something you don't like, either delete it or move it, and then rewind the playhead to the beginning and hit play again. And eventually, you will be able to watch that timeline and like it. Now, the only difference between that method of editing and my method of editing is I'm going to get you to the end a lot faster, a lot faster, okay? But what you should do, what I recommend people do all the time is just make a video about anything. This is how I sort my sock drawer, to call back to earlier. This is how I make a cup of coffee for my wife in the morning. Make a video about anything. And I would do it once a day. And then, and I'm talking about editing versus learning Final Cut, but here's where the learning Final Cut comes. If you do something 3 times in an hour, I promise you there's a faster way to do it. Take a break, learn how to do that, and then keep going. And you'll be shocked how much you will learn if you edit that way. But the bottom line is all we're doing here is telling stories with pictures. We're just telling stories with pictures. And you can do it with iMovie on your iPhone. You could do it with Final Cut. If you're, like crazy and hate your life, you can use Resolve. There's a lot of tools that you can use, but all we're doing is telling stories with pictures.
Yeah, you've got to be, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly for as long as it takes for you to get good at it.
I would like to also add that this is the top of the hour, and my last comment was a killer wrap up for the whole show.
I'm going to take one last question, and I'll answer it, and then I'll close this out. I know, Chris.
DJ's ruining the whole hour. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy.
This one's from Andre Dole in Berlin. Do you have a kind of agenda for this and upcoming episodes? What are we going to expect from this new breed of our little universe?
Well, from this new breed of our little universe, we are expecting a little bit of anything and everything. Because we're not doing second hours anymore, this is kind of our substitute for that, where we can really focus and dive in and dig deep on a specific thing and keep talking about it. And based on how excitable the conversation has been and how the questions have come in, I don't think this is 1 hour. This could be a couple hours or a series. Bill had a whole bunch of stuff prepared. We never really
get to see an actual timeline like this one that I'm.
Bill's got this amazing roles workflow for audiobooks that I really want to learn more about, and I'm excited to see for the next go round. But I'm going to be talking about it on the next special show council meeting so that we can figure out how to get these going. The plan is that we're going to try and know as early as 2 weeks before. The goal is to get to a 2-week lead ahead of any special show, and as soon as we have the crew and everything assembled and we're firm on it, then go into starting to promote it. But we don't want to go out and talk about it until we're really sure that it's solid. And sometimes we're going to be kind of like the second hours before, focusing on a specific topic, maybe occasionally bringing in an outside guest, but we're open to suggestions. If you want to, you can reach out to me, reach out to Florence, or a couple people. Just mention it in Discord, and I would love to keep that thing going. But it is a little past the top of the hour, so we're going to be wrapping. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris, so much for coming in and giving us some of your evening. It's an amazing time to to spend talking with people who've lived it, because there is no substitute for life experience, and the second best thing might be getting to hang out with people who have it and ask them questions. So we're very lucky there. Thank you to everyone watching and for putting in your questions and for participating in the chat. If we weren't able to get to your question, it's going to go back into your notes, but it's for the special shows, Makana specifically. So when we do, Final Cut Pro 10, the redo, the Redux, the part 2, we'll probably, that would be the time to bring that back in. But we love that, we love that you've got your, all the excitement in around this, because I really love the tool.
You're going to get a nasty note from Mark Spencer going, why didn't you show my picture too?
Thank you so much to everybody for being here, for Cindy for reading, on the back end crew, for Alan Scott, for Peter Belbin, Robert Green for working on the question management, working on the TD. We got an EIC. It takes, even the evening show, takes a little crew of people to run, and everybody's a volunteer and does it. We really appreciate it. I don't know how many bananas that we travel to do this show, but they're probably tasty if they're not plastic. Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you in the morning.